Please welcome your hosts for this morning's session, Nikki Campbell and Aidan Gallagher.
Thank you. Heads of state, your excellencies, ministers, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second day of the Illegal Wildlife Trade Conference 2018. My name is Aidan Gallagher. I'm an activist, actor, and UN Environment Goodwill Ambassador, and it is my honor to join you here today and continue the discussions that we've started yesterday. And I hope that my being here inspires you to remember that the youth of our world are counting on us to not only protect the species of this wonderful earth, but the ecosystems in which they live, as it affects all of us. It is my pleasure to introduce our host today, journalist and broadcaster, Nikki Campbell, OBE.
Thank you, Aidan. Well, you do such incredible work. He's a force of nature, and he's a force for nature, which is absolutely fantastic. I've been involved for some time in this, and when you walk around this conference and you see the tiger over there, what a heart-chillingly beautiful image. That is what we are fighting to save. When you see a baby elephant trying to wake up its mutilated mother, this incredible, self-aware being. When you see, it was an amazing report on the BBC yesterday about baby chimp smuggling. This is what we are fighting, the illicit profits and also the devastating effect on humans. But it's important for its own sake. We must never forget that amongst all our conversations. And a very quick word, before I get all formal on you, for the Asian elephant as well, which is perhaps not spoken about nearly enough. Now, I know there's an exploitation issue, but increasingly there's an issue of illegal trade with the growing, from Myanmar, with the growing trade in elephant skin jewelry, which is utterly disgusting. Now, most of you were here yesterday, and it's such an honor to be here today, such an honor to be standing on a stage beside Aidan as well. So from yesterday, you will have had the opportunity to hear from a very, very senior range of world leaders, which is fantastic. Voices from the front line and from non-government organizations, and also private sector representatives. Now, yesterday's speakers and video contributions provided such powerful messages about why we need to urgently take action to fight the illegal wildlife trade. Now, they demonstrated the urgency of concerted global action, or we will lose everything that we have if we don't act now. Future generations will not forgive us, nor should they. And they made clear the need for action beyond government. That is so important, working across all sectors to tackle this vile trade. Now, it's wonderful you're all here today. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And you're all taking the opportunity of being at this conference to strengthen your commitment to action and also your partnerships with others. So thank you.
Sessions today will address issues including halting global biodiversity loss, tackling illicit financial flows, collaboration between technology and conservation, and of course, illegal trade with live animals. Now, the range of issues being addressed here, and of course the experts attending these sessions, make it unfortunate that you cannot be in more than one place at the same time. So we know you will make the most of today, so let's all have a good time. Now, this session starts with a keynote address from the Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Michael Gove.
Welcome. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Aidan. Can I just thank Nikki and Aidan for their advocacy and for their passion, and thank all of you for your presence here today. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work of Ernest Hemingway, the American novelist. In his book, The Sun Also Rises, two of the characters are discussing their financial affairs. One of them reveals that, tragically, he's just gone bankrupt. His friend turns to him and says, "Well, how did that happen?" And the unfortunate victim says, well, it happened in two ways. Gradually, then suddenly. Gradually, then suddenly. That is so often how change happens, how catastrophes occur. If you look at the impact of man, our species, on Earth, we have had a gradual impact over time on our environment and on the other species with whom we share this beautiful planet. Gradually, we learned how to generate energy from nature, through fire, and then through the hydrocarbons, oil and gas. Gradually, we were able to use that energy, but suddenly, over the course of the last few decades, we have realized how dramatically we have been contributing, not just to the warming of our homes, but to the warming of our planet, to the point where climate change poses a huge threat, not just to us, not just to the species with whom we share this Earth, but to the ecosystem of the planet itself. And in the same way, gradually and then suddenly, mankind has had an impact on all of the creatures with whom we share this Earth. At the beginning of the last century, at the beginning of the 20th century, there were probably around 4 million African elephants. There are now around 400,000. Gradually, their numbers diminished, and suddenly, we now reach a point where 90% of the number that were alive just 100 years ago have disappeared. Overall, in my adult lifetime, since the beginning of the 1970s, we have seen 60% of the total number of mammals, amphibians, and reptiles and birds disappear from our planet. And as our Foreign Secretary reminded us just yesterday, there are 3 times as many in terms of just mass, in terms of energy consumption, in terms of footprint on this planet, 3 times as many of our species as there are of the rest of nature combined. If we carry on as we have been, then we will hack at the roots of the tree of life. We will fundamentally destabilize our world, and we will rob future generations of what is their rightful inheritance. And that brings us to the sharp end of what we have been discussing yesterday and today. There's no more pernicious, more evil, more wicked example of mankind's devastating impact on the planet and on other species than the persistence of the illegal wildlife trade. And as we've all heard, it is not just a moral wrong in itself to destroy the species with which we share this world for greed. It is also the case that it has a devastating impact on all of the communities that are affected by this crime. And we've heard during the course of this conference powerful and moving testimony from those countries most affected. The devastating impact of organized criminal gangs, the tentacles of terrorism reaching into so many territories, the destabilization of societies, the thwarting of sustainable economic growth because of the activities of those who engage in the illegal wildlife trade. And that is why those of us in countries like the United Kingdom have to act in accordance with the demands and the requests of the nations, the communities, our brothers and sisters most affected. And that is why we need to make sure that there is sustainable economic development in those countries so that people will have an alternative to the illegal wildlife trade, which gives them dignity and space and hope. It's why we need to ensure that we invest in dealing with some of the wrongs and sins of the past, like making sure that the legacy of conflict and exploitation is dealt with fairly, and that we support you in ensuring that there is reconciliation, and that practical questions, like removing the mines that scar Angola's countryside, are supported by cash and by goodwill. And we are also acting to ensure that those brave rangers, from whom we've just heard in that film, who do so much to protect the natural assets, the natural capital of the countries that they love, are giving the training and the support and the technology that they need in order to keep those species and their nations safe. And we've also heard from people, as Nikki pointed out, and as Aidan mentioned, from the private sector, who are determined to help. Our sponsors today, Cisco, Standard Chartered, National Geographic, but also all those who came together under the Financial Task Force, which His Royal Highness the Duke of Cambridge has done so much to bring together and to lead. Because we need to make sure that those flows of tainted money are stopped and those responsible for criminality are caught and made an example of. And that was why it was so inspirational to hear from President Bongo of Gabon that his country's biggest ivory trader has been caught by improved law enforcement and will go to jail for a record sentence as a result of the tougher-than-ever measures that his government have put in place. And we've also heard from other inspirational leaders from Africa, from President Mafisi of Botswana, from President Museveni of Uganda, about the steps that their nations are taking. And we're about to hear from 3 amazing and distinguished First Ladies who provide moral and political leadership to their peoples and force us in the rest of the world to ask our consciences, what are we doing to help? Well, at this conference, a record number of nations are present, and a record number of nations, not all of you yet, a record number of nations have signed up to our pledge to the London Declaration. And I would urge all of you today to sign that pledge, to take the opportunity also to make your own declarations and your own commitments and to record them in the pledging room here, and to make sure that a single, unified, clear voice emerges from this conference. A voice dedicated to making sure that we work together as one world to save the only world that we have, that we work together with one cause to make sure that those most affected by crime can be protected and saved from the evil criminals whose only interest is their own greed, not our welfare. And that we work together as one to recognize that the gradual awareness that so many have about the importance of preserving wildlife on our planet for the future becomes a sudden and irresistible wave of action this day. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much to Michael Gove. A lot of people are surprised we have a Secretary of State for the Environment who knows what he's talking about.
Next up, you will see a video of female rangers, which will act to demonstrate the key role that they play in tackling the illegal wildlife trade.
The team is made up of 17 rangers, and our daily duty is to patrol along the Zambezi Valley, looking for our animals, protecting them, looking for poachers.
Some female in the community, they are so proud of us. Before, they think this job is only for men. The poachers, they are so afraid of us because they know we have trained. So they know these girls are so dangerous. Now there are more animals, they are coming because they are safe, because we are protecting them from the poachers.
Final part of today's opening session is a call to action with a panel of distinguished women, moderated by Helen Clark, the former UNDP administrator, former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and we are especially grateful to Her Excellency, the First Lady of Sierra Leone, for joining us today as well. It's wonderful. Also on the panel are Dilys Rove from IIED, Clara Lucia Sierra Diaz, a community leader from Colombia, and Julie Bucknell from the World Bank. Now, they are going to share their personal experiences on the tragedy of the illegal wildlife trade as it affects people and as it affects communities as well, especially women and families. So please, welcome our panel. Welcome.
Thanks. Want me in the middle?
Yes, in the middle. Welcome. Can't wait for this. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nikki. And following the stirring words of Secretary of State Michael Gove and the Deputy Prime Minister of Democratic Republic of Congo, and being really stirred by that Go Girls video of the Rangers, we now have this amazing panel. And I'm going to call on each of them, and each contribution is about 3 minutes, so we're really going to be very to the point here. And I think we obviously want to hear a little about the disproportionate impact of this vicious illegal trade on women, but we also want to talk about women as leaders, women as entrepreneurs, women who are part of the whole chain of sustainable development and the solutions as well. So we'll range across these perspectives this morning. But can I begin first with the First Lady of Sierra Leone, and a very big welcome for being here. First Lady, you see a number of women in leadership positions, in public life, in business, in the environment. Would you like to say a little about where you see the role of women in tackling the illegal trade?
Good morning, everybody. Well, first of all, let me start with the video. That video just answered the question. When you have women leading a situation, sorry, I'm not trying to say the men don't do it, but women have a way they do things, especially in Africa. When a woman understands the problem, when a woman is able to understand what the situation is, and if that situation actually affects their family, if that situation will affect their children, it will affect their home, they will protect. They will protect that. They will make sure it doesn't get to them. And for instance, in Sierra Leone, let me speak for the country that I know very well. In Sierra Leone, the women ranges that we have, you have women in managerial position, you have women ministers, because they put them in these positions knowing full well that when they know the issues, they bring the issues to the community. In terms of wildlife crimes in Africa, there is a special way to communicate that to the people in the villages, in the remote areas. And women have the traditional way how they can communicate this information to a community. They have persuasive ways. They know what to tell a community leader. They know what to say to a paramount chiefs, for instance, because in those communities you have community leaders, you have paramount chiefs. And those paramount chiefs, you have to convince them. And if a woman goes to a paramount chief and then say, well, this is the problem we have, and this problem will affect not just this village, but it will affect a whole country, and they have a way. Now, Sierra Leone, women are not that empowered in terms of political positions, but in terms of solving problems, the men know there is no way they can achieve it without having a woman put at the front. And I traveled with Minister of Marine Resources, Minister of Agriculture, and the head of the National Protective. They're all female, and they are here to educate themselves. We have few elephants in Sierra Leone. We've had poachers come to Sierra Leone and kill our animals. We have, and when those things happen, the paramount chiefs, I don't think they even understand what is happening. They don't understand the disaster they're doing. They don't understand that. So now the women are the ones that actually goes to them and tell them, you can't do this because if you do this, this is what will happen to our community. This is what will happen. Africa also, bush meat, they don't see that as a crime. They just see it as food. They're in these villages and like, you know, I mean, I'm hungry. If I see an animal, if I can kill this animal and just get my food for the day, they don't see it as a crime. If there is a way that, you know, we can help them understand and a way that we educate them and also give them an empowerment for them to not depend on bushmeat. Because if all your dependence is on bushmeat, that is the only means you have to feed your family. It's difficult for you to say, you come to somebody and say, well, you can't feed your family with these animals because it is not good, but then you don't give them what they will give to their families. They won't listen. But like I said, when the women that are so persuasive, when they go there, they will not only tell you the nice part of the situation, they will bring the most difficult issues. They will make you feel guilty. I don't know whether that's been manipulative, but they will make you feel so guilty that the next time you want to do it, you'll be thinking about them. And for us to come here, First Lady's offices, we are not constituted, but then when you have issues like this, we're invited. We're invited because they know the woman can make a difference. The woman has the persuasive power to actually articulate those issues and get people to listen to them and change the way they live, change the way they deal with situations in their environment. The elephants in Sierra Leone, we're trying to protect them, and we have a lot of women rangers who are there, even if the men want to change, because again, I try to find who the poachers are. It's difficult for you to see a female poacher. It's really difficult for you to see a female poacher. So, and when the women goes into this bush to protect the animals, they're so strict. They will not allow you to do it. They will not allow, absolutely. So there's always a confrontation, and the men in Africa believe that they are we're the king of this place. So when we talk, you follow. And the women will now defend and say, no, when it comes to problems, when it will affect us more. They struggle when it comes to war. The women will suffer more. So African women now, they are basically in a defensive position. They defend anything they know that will affect their territory, they will defend it. So the wildlife trade at the moment, that's the reason why more African women have come forward to defend it, because they know the people who are also poachers, they don't only kill animals, they also, they destroy the environment, they log trees to get into these bushes, and all that is actually destroying our ecosystem. If we want to protect all of this, I think we need to have a lot of women, and when we have conferences like this also, we have to also bring in traditional women leaders, because they have the message, and like a woman can talk to their husband in the room, and when the husband goes outside and want to change their mind, they will think about what will happen when I go home. They will think very seriously about what will happen. So really, I think the way forward for Africa, because the policies are there, but whether they enact or they are acted upon also is another thing. And most of these poachers, they have money, and because of corruption, because of the way the corruption is in Africa, you will catch them today, and tomorrow you will see them on the street again. The law enforcement agencies, they also work with the corrupt people. So I think putting women in front and making them understand that this is more difficult for them and will affect them and their children. Every woman in this world will protect their child with their life. Every woman will protect their husband with their life. So they should be at the front, and they should keep them at the front, because that is the way this illegal life thing will definitely stop. So hopefully next year when we come to London, we'll have traditional women leaders from Africa. They should come here. Give them the message, they will take the message, and believe you me, the difference will be felt immediately.
Well, that's a powerful voice for women as communicators. Thank you. Thank you so much. Dilys, coming to you, how do you see the illegal wildlife trade impacting on the communities and families where you've been working?
Thanks for the question, Helen. I think it's a really important one, because it's so easy to forget that illegal wildlife trade is much more than a conservation issue, and it does have real impacts on real people that live alongside wildlife. So the Secretary of State pointed out the impacts that the insecurity that organised crime brings to local communities. But we organised an event, my organisation, with IUCN, Fauna and Flora International and the Zoological Society of London the day before this conference to bring together 40 community representatives from all around the world to talk about their personal experiences of illegal wildlife trade. And one of our representatives from the Karen state in Myanmar pointed out to us really eloquently how for him poaching of cats and other carnivores in the area where he lives has had a major impact on herbivore populations. And herbivores include things like wild pigs and rodents, which then go into his paddy fields and really destroy his crops and undermine his livelihoods. So it's a really indirect impact, and one that we won't necessarily think of immediately, that has a real impact on his livelihood. From elsewhere, from Namibia, Tanzania, and elsewhere, we heard about how the depletion of key iconic species populations have really reduced the opportunity for local communities to earn economic benefits from tourism, from trophy hunting, and so on, because the numbers of those wildlife species are declining. We also have to remember that it's not just illegal wildlife trade itself which has direct impacts on communities, but the way we tackle illegal wildlife trade can also have impacts on communities. So we've heard horror stories of human rights abuses meted out on local men and women by heavy-handed, poorly targeted law enforcement and by other initiatives which fail to recognize that the people that sometimes that they encounter aren't the kingpins involved in illegal wildlife trade. They really are the people at the very bottom of the chain. So I think we really need to involve communities much more directly in discussions that we have about how to tackle illegal wildlife trade in order that we're more aware of these issues and we can factor them into decision making. And involving local communities, as the First Lady pointed out, doesn't just entail talking to the men in those communities. We really need to also talk to the women and the youth and understand that all of these different groups within communities have very different perspectives and feel the impacts in different ways. So it's important to make sure we involve communities, but make sure that that involvement is widespread.
Amazing. And Clara, bringing you in from Colombia, involving communities, engaging communities is at the heart of what you do. So bring us your experience.
Okay, thank you, Helen. And one of the special issue about education, it has to be with knowledge. And I think that the communities has the more important knowledge about their ecosystem because the community lives right there in their ecosystem. I bring just an example to show you all. This is the way we have write down the knowledge about a very specific species that we work on it. In most of the books, you find out that this species is called specialist species because their type of food. But when we go to the communities, we find out that the communities know that this species eats about 100 different type of prey. But we know at the communities that this type of animals eat those prey in different times of the year round, and they use different type of strategies. They move around their bodies in different ways, so they can, we know in a specific issue about what time of the year is the animal in it, is it a reproduction time, what time of prey are, what the nature is bringing to them. So I just want to point it that there is so much local knowledge that we miss when we just thinking about formal or conventional education. So what about the local knowledge that will lead at us to end wildlife crime? And for that point, in my community, crocodile poachers have become protectors. And I want to emphasize that legal, sustainable wildlife trade give us a reason to conserve. It provides benefits that give people an economical incentive to protection. We really will not succeed in stopping poaching and illegal wildlife trade without the support of communities, without the opportunity to know about what the knowledge they have because they live right there. This is another example. This is from the Amazonian River. It's an endemic species too. And this is the way we put our information. And maybe we can put it in the books and write down in black and white, but we can do it in this way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, to Julia Bucknell from the World Bank. Julia, how does the bank approach engaging women in the response that you support?
Sure, great, thank you. Well, I want to talk about two things, investment and processes. And on the investment side, you know, we invest in in the whole range of issues that affect this issue, this topic. So we can invest in protected areas themselves. We can also invest in nature-based tourism, invest in judicial reform and the banking sector that help clean that from this kind of crime. So I think the investment side of it is super important. We have $1.25 billion of investments of that kind already, and I think we could do a lot more to support countries' efforts in that area. I'd like to give one little example that's specific to women. So some part of this illegal trade is about stopping the trade altogether, and some part of it is about passing it from illegal to legal. And in the Solomon Islands, there's a lot of illegal tuna fish trade, and we worked with our private sector arm, so the World Bank part, which did the public sector side, tried to stop the illegal fishing, and then the private sector side invested in a processing plant. And this processing plant, 90% of fish processing is done by women. So this processing plant employs only women. The jobs have gone from illegal, insecure, with really terrible working conditions, to having good working conditions, healthcare, all that kind of thing. It's the second biggest employer in the country, and the revenues are larger than the entire ODA flows, overseas development assistance flows for the country. So it's a really nice story of combining kind of the public sector, the private sector, and having specific benefits to women. So we can invest in the issue, and we can do it with a women focus, which very often leads to success. And on my point on process, in everything we do, we have to consult with women, with people throughout the process. And that consultation, so from the kind of what are we going to do, all the way through to how did it go, right? All the way through that process. And we have to have a very clear distinction of vulnerable groups. So that can be women, it can be underserved communities, it can be indigenous people, it can be disabled people, or any type. And we can have a specific process geared to getting their voice into the idea, making sure that they're represented in local decision-making processes. It doesn't just happen on its own. For years we kind of said, come along women, come and join our processes, and we're surprised to find it didn't always work. So now we are actually actively making it happen in a very deliberate way. And so whether it's a road near the community or an agricultural project somewhere near, the women are going to get more empowered, and they will then be able to make their voice heard on issues such as this, whether or not we or any other external agency is involved. And an empowered woman can, whether they're empowered through an ag project or any other project, can really make their voice heard for the priorities of their community.
Mm-hmm. So there we have it. Women are central to the response. Women's voices, women as communicators, women engaged in the decision-making, women engaged in the economic benefits, women at every point of the process. If we can take that message from this panel, we'll all be very happy here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi.
Let's have one more round of applause for our esteemed guests here tonight. Thank you.